Welcome to this 10-part series about the Danish author Martinus, hosted by me, Lauge Schøler, and my co-host Karsten Jensen. The aim of this series is to provide an in-depth overview of Martinus and his work, the Third Testament. Martinus is mostly known in Scandinavia. However, there is a growing interest around the world in non-dogmatic approaches to spirituality, and as such, many non-Scandinavian speakers whom we assume will find his teachings interesting. But since most material about Martinus is in Danish, it can be a challenge for people outside of Scandinavia to know where to start or get a proper overview of the material. Over these 10 episodes, we dive into some technical detail as we try to convey some of Martinus' ideas. Martinus' work is vast and complex and takes up over 10,000 written pages, but we have picked 10 of the most central ideas to explore. We strive to make it as accessible as possible, and we hope it can provide the initial understanding of the most basic concepts that will make further study of his text more digestible. If you're interested in Martinus and his cosmology, you're welcome to visit martinus.dk for more information. In Denmark, there's an institute in Copenhagen which maintains the day-to-day administration, and there is a summer holiday center in Klint in northern Sjælland, where people interested in Martinus meet and study his works. Please enjoy. All right, welcome back. This is episode 5, about the structure of the living being. And I think this is going to be one of the more technical episodes, but I think it's very important to have this theoretical foundation for the further episodes that we will get into.
And maybe we could go a bit into what is Martinus trying to achieve by describing the living being. So what is he actually doing? And I think one way of looking at it is that you can ask, in a sense, what constitutes that a being is a living being? So we have all different kinds of living beings. I mean, in Martinus' view, everything is life. There's nothing but living beings. Mm-hmm. The living being is, in a sense, what constitutes the cosmos.
Yeah.
So the cosmos as a whole is a living being, mm-hmm. and it's populated with living beings all through and through.
Yeah, living beings within living beings.
Yes.
And we also get into that in another episode about the micro and the macro.
Yes.
Because it's living beings all the way up, living beings all the way down.
So we have all these different kinds of living beings, mm-hmm. cells, and in Martinus' view, organ systems are also living beings, mm-hmm. and solar systems and so on. We'll come back to that, but also just we look at the evolutionary perspective that is close to home, so to speak, mm-hmm. we have plants. Mm-hmm. So a plant is a living being. Everybody would agree on that. Mm-hmm. Animals are living beings, mm-hmm. and then there are human beings, mm-hmm. and there might be other life forms. Mm-hmm. You could talk about bacteria and mm-hmm. things like that. Mm-hmm. And so one could ask the question, what constitutes that a living being is? What do all living beings, in a sense, have in common? Mm-hmm. Like, what's the archetypical living being, or the archetype of the living being?
The basic structure of everything, like from microbes to galaxies and everything in between. They have the same structure.
Yes.
And also for a visual aid, maybe if you want to pause the episode and find this on the website, it's symbol number 6 is a very good visual representation of what we're talking about here. Is this three-part structure of the living being, and I think it's very helpful to see that visually before you're able to grasp it.
Yes, and so in a way it's very simple. Mm-hmm. Saying that the living being has 3 parts might not be correct. Mm-hmm. In a sense, Martinus, when he talks about the living being, mm-hmm. the ultimate analysis is that it's just something that is.
Yeah.
And sometimes he would say an unnameable something that is.
Yeah.
And this unnameable something that is, you can have, it has different aspects, so you can analyze it in different ways. Mm-hmm. So he says that, so get the full picture, you need 3 different analyses. Mm-hmm. So it's a tri-unit structure. Mm-hmm. And if we take it kind of bottom up, what constitutes a living being is that it has an experience of life.
Yeah.
So that's that's the fundamental property that all living beings have in common. And the way Martinus described it is that all experiences are constituted by 6 basic faculties of consciousness, or basic energies, as he also would call it, because it's faculties of mind or consciousness, but it's also energies of nature.
Yeah.
So these energies constitute all kinds of phenomena that we can experience, both those that are in our environment and those that we experience within as thoughts, feelings, and so on.
Yeah. And it constitutes of these 6 basic energies that we'll get into in a later episode, and also the mother energy that we'll get into later.
Yeah. But maybe just mention them briefly now. And some of them, I mean, some of the terms that Martinus use here are very common. We all know about them, but they maybe haven't been described in this particular structural way that Martinus is doing by anyone before. But instinct is the first one.
Yeah, then there is the animal kingdom.
Sorry?
Yeah, which is the animal kingdom.
Plant kingdom.
Yeah. So the plant kingdom. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the dominating energy in the plant kingdom. So I think also we briefly earlier on mentioned there's these combinations of the basic energies where they will be dominating in different phases of evolution. So in the plant kingdom, it's the instinct that dominates. It's all the automatic things happening within. I mean, we don't have to think about our heart beating and so on. That's still it happens automatically.
Yeah.
And so this is the dominating feature of plants. And then you have what he calls the energy of gravity, and it's not what physicists would call gravity. It's an expansive, explosive energy.
Yeah.
Psychologically, it's the dominating energy of hatred, of killing other beings,
anger,
or you could think about the predator taking its prey, the kind of explosion.
Yeah. And he says also it overshadows the gut region in the human being.
Yes, and so that's I mean, it's like the motor faculty in the sense of the living being, and that's the dominating feature of animals. So the difference between animals and plants is that animals are moving around, whereas plants are kind of stuck to the same place.
Yeah.
And so killing, hatred, and all these things, that also Martinus will talk about evolutionary. It's the hell zone where this energy is dominating. Then you have the energy of feeling, which is our, say, ability to experience our environment and feel something rather than nothing.
Yeah.
But it's also, and that's a bit counterintuitive, it's also the coolness of the universe.
The coalescing energy.
Yes. So gravity in Martinus's terms are expansive, feeling is contractive, and all physical phenomena are actually based on these 3 energies, the tension between feeling and gravity, expansion and contraction, and then instinct kind of regulating the dynamics between these 2 energies. And so this will be the dominating energy in the future when we acquire Christ consciousness, because it's also the dominating feature of compassion and love for one another.
Exactly.
And then we have intelligence or wisdom, which will be dominating a lot later in a spiritual kingdom that Martinus calls the kingdom of wisdom. Then we have, and intelligence is also what is kind of embodied in the nervous system.
Yeah.
Feeling in the lungs.
The brain. You're feeling in the lungs and intelligence in the brain.
Yeah, lungs and heart, the blood circulation, and feelings in the brain and nervous system. Intelligence in the brain and nervous system. And then gravity, you mentioned that was the digestive system. Mm-hmm. And then instinct, that's actually skin and muscle.
Yeah.
And then we have the energy of intuition, which is dormant or latent in the animal kingdom, but it's gradually awakening in the most, say, progressed human beings.
Yeah.
And it's the ability to experience that which is beyond time and space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you could say Martinus's work is written to stimulate this faculty of intuition.
The organ of intuition.
Yes, exactly.
Which also overshadows the genitals, right?
The sexual system, yeah.
Sexual system,
yeah, the genitals for sure.
Yeah.
And then you have the energy of memory, which is the last one. And we all know we have some sense of what memory is, but in Martinus's view, the memory culminates in a state of bliss. So it's a dominating feature of a kingdom of nature that he calls the kingdom of bliss. And it has, in this blissful state, there's a kind of excess energy that kind of spills over from the spiritual domain into the physical domain and become what we know as mineral matter. Yeah. And in mineral matter, there's no kind of experience of its environment. It's in a sense, it's a kind of product of a byproduct, you could say, of these spiritual beings being in this state of bliss, coming from remembering the past from a previous spiral cycle.
And it overshadows the bone structure, right?
And it overshadows the bone structure, yes, of the physical being. So,
and this is only when it comes to human beings. It doesn't apply to galaxies per se, but like in our particular.
But of course, if you look at the planet, for example, you can see there are mineral structures as well. And there are plant structures and there are animal structures and so on.
So on and so forth, yeah. Yeah, and it's also important to note that it's eternal. As you also mentioned in the previous episodes, that all beings are eternal. They've been existing forever, and they will continue to exist forever.
And these faculties are eternal as well, but they're shifting in, say, intensity. Yeah. So they have different degrees of intensity. So we don't need to go in detail, but for example, if you look at the plant, instinct is dominating, intelligence is latent, and some of the faculties, for example, memory is decreasing, and the same is true for intuition, whereas feeling is increasing. Yeah. And so you can make the same kind of analysis with all the different kinds of beings. You can look at the combination of these different, say, faculties or energies. Yeah. And and then you have some kind of you have the regulation, you could say, or processing of these dynamics. And that happens, so there we need to make another kind of analysis of the living being, where we're not looking at the experience, but we're looking at that which is creating the experience. Yeah. So we have this faculty of creation and experience that Martinus also calls, as you mentioned, the mother energy. Yeah. And this faculty can be described by a large number of principles that Martinus calls principles of creation. And it's things like the principle of contrast. So we cannot have an experience without there being contrast. It's attraction and repulsion. It's hunger and satiation. So all experiences are based on us being hungry after certain experiences, longing for them, and satiated by others. And of course, there's a connection between these different principles. So it's the hunger and satiation is connected with attraction and repulsion.
Yeah.
And also it's responsible for the development of new contrasts all the time, because we need contrasts both in space but also in time. We need change to renew our experience all the time.
Yeah.
And there are also other principles. So, for example, there's the principle of perspective. We cannot have an experience unless we have a particular perspective.
Yeah.
And a particular perspective is it's a limitation. But without this limitation happening, we wouldn't experience anything. There'd be just nothing to experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are, you could enumerate, some have tried to enumerate these principles, but I think, I'm not sure there's a finite number, because it's different ways of trying to describe this faculty of creating an experience. But one of the things we touched upon the last time is that there's, in this faculty of creation and experience, there's something Martinus called the mother core, which is where we have the sexual poles, this ability of the eye to be a source of manifestation, but also a sink, a perceiver, you could say, of an experiencer of manifestation. Yeah. So that's the masculine and the feminine pole. And then you have something he calls primordial desire, which is kind of the innermost part. It's the connection between the faculty of creation and experience and what he calls the eye, which we'll come into a little later. But in this, so this primordial desire is a desire for manifestation and experience, not any particular manifestation or any particular experience, but just for renewal of experience in general. So it's you could say all desires, in a sense, embody the primordial desire, but a desire is something that it has a limited time span. It's replaced by a new desire. But you could say the very principle of desire being something that is renewed all the time, although it's changing. Yeah. That's what he calls the primordial desire. Yeah. And there's a couple of features. So this, there's a whole science, you could say, to understanding this faculty of creation experience. Yeah. You also have something he calls the element of destiny, which is where we kind of accumulate our experiences and where they're turned into something he calls talent kernels. Yeah, exactly. So, for example, if we practice something repeatedly, like playing the piano or some sport or reading or writing or doing science or whatever, we create these talent kernels that are kind of stored in. So this element of destiny, it's like a storage register.
Maybe we can just get into the X analysis. I think it would be helpful here. That we have the X1, the X2, and the X3.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Yeah. So what we described as our experience is what he calls X3. Yeah. And he used
this is what happens on the physical plane.
And the spiritual. Yeah. It's any kind of experience we have, whether it's physical or it's thoughts, ideas or so. Yeah. So what we experience, he calls X3. And the reason why he uses, in X, it's something you use in mathematics. Yeah.
You have time to paint a picture here. If you see it on the symbol, you have like a pyramid and then divided into three parts. And then the top part is X1, and the middle part is x2, and the bottom part is x3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are these three, and what we've described so far is x3 and x2.
Yeah.
But I just want to explain that he used the term x, like we do in mathematics, where it represents some unknowable.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we have to do with something where the only analysis we can do is that it exists.
Exactly.
But we cannot say anything more about it. But then again, you have these kind of access points into this unknowable, something that is where our experience is one access point. This is what he calls X3.
Yeah.
And this faculty of creation experience is X2.
Yeah.
So it's another access point, you could say.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you can make this, what he calls the analysis of the I.
In the X1.
X1, yeah. And the only analysis you can do from this perspective is simply saying that it is a nameless something that is.
Yeah.
So this triunic structure is what constitutes the living being.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also here on the physical plane. I know there's also spiritual beings, but let's just be for now. But here on the physical plane, then we are something that has an ability to create, and then create as it manifests into the physical world here, where we walk around here with all our energies and talents and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, and the last time we also talked about there's all these polarities in Martinus' description. And so one of these polarities is the polarity between that which is unmanifest and eternally unmanifest in a sense.
Yeah.
It's the source of manifestation. And in the other, so that's X1. And in the other end of the spectrum, you have our actual experiences, which is X3. The reason why it's nameless is that it cannot be characterized by any particular experience.
Yeah.
So experience is something that is changing all the time and it's renewed all the time. And in a sense, no two experiences are ever the same.
Yeah.
So in that sense, even though you can describe particular experiences, there's not one experience that kind of constitute all experiences.
It's true, and you cannot give it any attributes. You can't say it's big or small or red or green or sweet or bitter or anything. Yeah.
So that's why with all these three analyses, you just end up saying that it's simply a nameless something that is. Yeah. Although in some sense, so there's this kind of paradox here, which we're trying to conceptualize and describe something
that cannot be described.
That cannot, but it's a tension that is productive. I mean, we can, although it's important to understand that in a sense that it's nameless, but also we can deepen our knowledge or acquaintance with what it means to be a living being by trying to conceptualize these things. And this is what Martinus is doing rather impressively, I think, that he has this talent for finding ways to describe something that is
beyond because a lot of this you can only grasp through intuition. Right? Yes. That's the point. Like he uses his faculty not of intelligence but of intuition to grasp facts of the universe intuitively, and he tried to use his intelligence to kind of make it digestible in written form for people like us who walk around here who only have a little tiny sliver of intuition and who might be able to grasp in some way what he's talking about.
Yeah, so he also used the term imagination to describe how he gives shape or form to that which, when he received, so he talked about these intuitions as being beyond time and space. Yeah. But he had to, to communicate, we need to put things into structure. Yeah. Structures that are spatial and temporal. Exactly. And that's what he's done in his symbols and in his words and in his spoken lectures, spoken lectures, and written books and articles and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, but you done?
No, it's okay.
Sure, but I think one point I really want to get across is like that in the universe, in the cosmos, there is a timeless dimension and there's a timely dimension, and those two interact all the time. So there's something that is the core of our being is on the timeless dimension.
Yeah,
and it has been going on forever. We've never been. We never started. We'll never finish. So all these incarnations that we go through, they're endless. There's an endless chain of incarnations behind us and an endless chain of incarnations ahead of us. And what it does is like every time we reincarnate, this being it reaches down into the physical matter and into the timely dimension where the action happens.
Yes, and there's also, I mean, there's something more to be said about that. So first of all, there's this 19th century English poet and painter, William Blake, who once said, "Eternity loves the productions of time."
Yeah.
And you find something similar in Martinus's description of the relationship between that which is unmanifest, eternal, beyond time and space, and then our manifestation. There's a mutual interdependency, you could say. So Martinus would would talk about, I mean, one thing about the I, X1, is that it's something we all have a share in. We all participate in the same I.
Yeah.
So there's this, in the unmanifest realm, or eternally, or seen from the point of infinity, there's this oneness of all beings. But in our actual experience, there's a manifold of, I mean, even in a single being, there's, in the manifestation, there's a manifold. So we have a body, but this body is composed of organ systems, which are composed of cells, and also we have all the different sensory faculties and so on.
Exactly.
And all this need to be combined and kind of unified. And so you could say the I is that which, it contributes with unification of the manifold, which everything in a sense would fall apart if it wasn't for the I, X1, the unmanifest, to kind of hold everything together. So Martinus, he doesn't talk like Blake. He said, eternity loves the productions of time. But Martinus would say that oneness is longing for the manifold, and the manifold is longing for oneness. Yeah. And so there is this interdependency, you could say, between. There's this polarity in our being. It's a spectrum that goes from the unmanifest to the manifest world. But there's also this interdependency between the outer ends of this.
There's a thing. Also, like what most people experience who have profound religious or spiritual experiences or cosmic glimpses or so on, they have this feeling of unity, right?
That's very common, yes.
Yeah, that they sense that all consciousness is one, which is this in some technical sense, right? That everything is one, and then all these eyes, they melt in together to this one super conscious, it's one consciousness that is pervading the entire universe. And then for it to have experiences, it needs to splinter out into godsons, right? Like the Godhead and the godsons. And then all these splinters, all these divisions, this is where the action happens, and this is where all the interaction happens.
Yes, and maybe we could say to the listener that if you go to martinus.dk and look at symbols 8, 9, and 10, and the description, and then 11, which is a combination of 8, 9, and 10. Yeah. And there you can see, one of the things that you can see is that that what is responsible for the one manifesting as the manifold is this faculty of creation and experience. Yeah. And also it's the principle of perspective. So it's the fact that the one, the oneness that is expressed in terms of X1 or the I couldn't have any experience if it wasn't for the manifold. So Martinus will also use the terms reality and illusion. So in a sense, the ultimate reality is the I.
Yeah.
But the I, since it's unmanifest and since it hasn't got any characteristics, it cannot experience itself unless it has this capacity for creating a contrast to itself. And Martinus will say about this contrast, the manifest world, that in a sense it's an illusion, it's unreal, but it's an unreality that is necessary. So he would also call it the glory of God. The manifest world is the glory of God, because it's that which allows both the individual living, but also the Godhead itself to have any kind of experience.
Yeah, that's true. The important thing is to remember this has been going on forever, or literally in eternity. This design of the cosmos and the living beings is like a design has been there always. Nobody came up with it.
It's uncreated.
Yeah.
So that which is created is our particular experiences. And one thing is that God, you could call God the creator, but we're all co-creators because we all participate in the divinity.
Yeah.
Through the I. Through this, you could also, I think Rudolf Steiner, he called the I the holiest of the holy. And also, although Martinus doesn't use this term, it is quite adequate to describe what he means, that you have this inner holy divine core, which is in a sense unfathomable and ungraspable, but it's there, and also something you have to. So here, and there's another quote from a philosopher I think can be helpful. There was the creator of the Neoplatonic philosophy. His name was Plotinus. He was a Greek philosopher in, 300 years before Christ or so. But he had this concept of the one. So he had a kind of Trinitarian structure. We don't have to go into that. But he had this concept of the one. And he said, you cannot understand the one, but you can be the one.
Yeah.
And so the difficulty about grasping the I is that it's not, you cannot get to know the I as a knowledge about something, but you can have a kind of insight into your own identity with this I, which is not different from the I of anyone else, because it's the same divine nature, you could say, that we all share and participate in.
Yeah.
And also, it's Martinus would also use the term silence to describe it.
Yeah.
So you can see, in a sense, all manifestation, our experiences, it's three. It's all movement, it's all process, it's ever-changing evolution towards something else.
Yeah.
And the only reason why we can experience these processes is because we, in our innermost core, is not a process, but we are stillness.
Okay, that's what he says, that if it was only stillness, there would be no experience. If there was only movement, there would be nobody to feel it. But the point is that you have the stillness of the I, and then you have the movement rubbing up against the I continuously, and this is what creates the internal experience.
Yeah, and he has this process that he calls the turning of the energies in the I.
Yeah.
So there's actually, and I think here we also enter into the, you could say, almost the core of the mystery of life.
Sure.
that the thing about the eye is that, in a sense, it cannot create anything.
Yeah.
It can only recreate that which already it can maintain, you could say, and change the creation.
Because it was, he said, like, energy cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in another place, he said that which exists has always existed and will always exist.
Yeah.
But there's this kind of miraculous process called the turning of the energies in the eye, where movement becomes stillness, and stillness then becomes movement.
It's super geeky, but
and he also described it as a fertilization.
Yeah.
So it's so the eye, the person, the living creature, is fertilized by any experience that we have. Yeah. And then there's a kind of pregnancy happening. Yeah. And then this impression that we have is turned into an expression. Yeah. And this expression is then kind of impregnated with our personal qualities. Yeah. And this is happening all the time. Yeah. And something that is actually, so it's also in a sense, it's the sexual principle. Yeah. That not as something that is happening between a male and a female, but as a fundamental principle of life and experience overall. Yes. It's this, all experience is sexual in nature, and also the say ultimate goal of any kind of experience is to be blissful.
That's what he called the highest fire, right?
The highest fire is the term that he uses.
Everything is in essence sexual, which can sound a little weird if you haven't heard it before, but it's like it's the continuous desire for experience.
It's like a micro-orgasm. And then actually what happens as we evolve is that this micro-orgasm becomes a macro-orgasm. Yeah. As we progress into these realms of existence where we kind of leave the habits of the animal kingdom behind, and all the warring and the jealousy and the hatred and all these negative emotions and so on. So as we progress from that into this new realm of Christ consciousness, Martinus described how all our existence will become kind of an art form. Yeah. So we'll become artists of life. Yeah. And we will have this ability to create pleasure both for ourselves and for our fellow beings. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And I think also one term he uses is to describe this is the superconscious and the subconscious, right? That the X1 is the superconscious, and then
X1 and X2.
Yeah. And then everything below that is subconscious. And it's not subconscious in the Freudian sense.
No.
But it's like it's this division between the two parts.
Yeah, so actually in the beginning of Liebesbo, Martinus used the term subconscious in the kind of traditional psychological way to understand it. Yeah. That which is beneath our level of daily consciousness. Yeah. But then he changed, so he would talk instead about our daily consciousness and our nightly consciousness. Yeah. So the nightly consciousness kind of corresponds to what psychologists call subconsciousness. But then he would change the term and use it as subconsciousness as relative to superconsciousness. Yeah. And so X1 and X2, that's our superconsciousness, because it's not what's in prime view, you could say, of our experience. It's kind of in the background. Yeah. So it's that it constitutes our conscious experience. Yeah. But one of the things that he would say that we have to learn, in a sense, to experience or sense eternity.
Yeah.
And what that means is that we have to become consciously aware of this, the two hidden background of our experience.
Yeah.
That's the whole, you could say, that's the whole goal of this practice of studying spiritual science.
Yeah.
It's to awaken this awareness of these hidden dimensions of our own being, and of the beings, you could say the hidden dimensions of our fellow beings.
Yeah.
And because they're kind of the same.
Yeah.
So if we know ourselves, we will also come to know those we have around us. But we have to. So Martinus wants to stimulate us to become aware and have kind of experience in these dimensions. And
it's also like it's a completely different way of viewing yourself and viewing other human beings and animals, so on. You see, like, I'm not just a body walking around. I'm at something unmanifested has been manifested into the world.
Yes, and one of the things that Martinus mentioned is we cannot actually see each other.
We cannot actually see that. No.
That which we see is kind of it's like if you're looking at an image, you're not looking at the person.
Yeah.
The person is not there because it's just an image. And so, in a sense, our body is it's like a hologram of something else that we don't see, but that is kind of present in the manifestation that we call our organism.
Yeah.
So this structure of the living being, to become acquainted with that is kind of process of self-realization.
Yeah.
And of course it's also it's you have to develop say discernment in terms of you have to come to understand what's different between us and how that's tied up with evolution and evolutionary processes. And some people that we meet further progressed in evolution than we are, and others are lagging behind.
Yeah.
And so when Martinus talks about self-knowledge or self-awareness, he would very often mean understanding our place in this cosmic evolution.
Yeah, this long chain of beings.
Yeah, simply come to understand where we are, and also understand our limitations. Understand that there are things we do not know because we are lacking these faculties.
Yeah.
But of course, another dimension is to come to understand these superconscious aspects of our own being.
Yeah.
And this is also this is also kind of a presupposition for our experience of love in our relationship with other beings, because Martinus would talk about love as unconsciously recognizing yourself in the other being.
Yeah, exactly. It also makes you take things a little less personally. Like, I'm an eternal being, you're an eternal being, and there's just an exchange of energy here, which is karma between us, right? Yeah,
for sure. And of course, one thing that he would strongly advocate was that we give up what he calls our victim consciousness, victim mentality, and come to assume responsibility for our own destiny. And of course, so early on we talked about reincarnation and karma, and we have to come to understand how when we meet other people and phenomena in the world overall, it's Martinus would talk about it mentally mirroring our own state of being.
Exactly.
So looking at the world that we have around us, we can come to know something about ourselves and where we are in the evolutionary.
Because it's energy you have turned around inside you and sent out and receiving back. So it's a very important concept with Martinus that the world is a mirror.
Yes.
The world is a mirror of like the people you meet, how you're treated.
It's a mental mirror, that's what he calls it.
Yeah. It's a mental mirror because it's by no means accidental what you bump into and how other people treat you. So every time you have an experience, it's like, it's a pause for self-reflection. It's like, okay.
it's a process of education.
Yeah.
The whole evolutionary process is an educational process.
Yeah.
And it's about getting to know yourself better by contemplating these experiences that you have in light of your knowledge about the spiritual laws, but also your own constitution, how you're actually constituted as this tri-unit being.
Exactly, and it's a refinement process, right? Because that's the whole point now, that we are just living out of the animal kingdom. It's all the animalistic energies we've been sending out, they come back and then they purify us. We through this grinding process that we're going through.
Yeah, there's a lot of grinding going on
exactly
all the time.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, I guess that was it about the structure of the living being.